Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming back. Our next session is going to start with Sam Paterson. Mr. Sam Paterson is an IR analyst with MDSet, and he's going to be presenting his talk, Introduction to Incident Response. Mr. Paterson has been working as an incident response consultant for 2 years after completing his BSc and postgraduate diploma in cybersecurity at Staffordshire University. He has assisted in several incidents ranging from ransomware to web attacks. He has a keen interest in both offensive and defensive security and also enjoys learning about hardware hacking in his own time. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Sam Paterson, and please feel free to take over now. And what we've been doing, it's been, I think it's like a 40-minute-ish or 35-minute presentation and then questions at the end. Is that suitable for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay.
I've also got my my social media links in there as well. So if we don't have enough time, anyone has any more questions, they can reach out to me there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So very much
go ahead and take over.
Thanks for the warm introduction. Yeah, so as I say, my name's Sam Paterson, and I'm going to be giving a talk today regarding response. It's going to be a fairly high-level talk, I think, compared to some of the rest of the talks. I just want to give an overview, basically, as a newish consultant to the industry, and just kind of give, I believe that the demographic of the audience is mainly students or beginners. So just kind of give an
pretty much, mostly students.
Yeah, that's good. So I just want to give an insight into the role. I know when I was at university and I was leaving, looking for a role, it can feel quite daunting, and I found the best way to find where I wanted to be is to talk to people in the industry. And you get a better idea of the role and what you're going to take part in, and a boost as well into the industry. Yeah, so as I say, I'm going to cover an overview of incident response. I will be keeping it fairly high level. If we went to things, the talk could go on for hours. So what I will be doing is I'll be covering the incident response lifecycle. Talking you through the typical response to an incident. I work at the moment, so our incidents normally come from our clients. So this will change with other organizations. They might have an internal security team, so it will be dealt with in-house. And then I'll cover some of the common tasks that you might face as an incident responder, maybe on your daily duties, and some of the common tools that we use as well to accomplish these tasks. And as I say, there's quite a lot to go through. So I have included some additional resources as well. So if you fancy learning some more technical knowledge, you can go off in your own time. And hopefully that'll give you a nice boost into the knowledge and give you put your 2 feet on the ground if you're looking to moving towards incident response. But it also can apply to other roles, such as SOC analysts, malware analysis, threat intelligence, anything blue team related. They're all good skills to have. So yes, as I say, I've introduced myself. I've been working at MDSet now for around 2 years. So we're a security consultancy, and we specialize in red teaming, pen testing, application security, and we also do incident response and response services. So I work in the response team. We've got a small team of analysts where we work to provide proactive and reactive response services to our clients. So our clients can either be retained clients, which businesses have reached out to us in the past, and they've looked to have our services proactively, so we can work with them to establish a relationship beforehand and make sure they're well prepared for incidents. But we also do emergency response as well. So maybe customers or clients that have just been caught off guard with an incident, or they want something they're looking into, they can reach out to us and we can provide those services as well. So what is incident response altogether, if you're wondering, or if you've not heard about it before? The name suggests it's responding to security incidents. So they comes under several names. Some people refer them to breaches, there may be vulnerabilities, and obviously in recent years we have a lot of cyber attacks now as well. So we branch them all into the term of incidents. They can also include insider threats as well. So rogue employees within the company can cause incidents as well. And there's a wide range of issues that can cause there. So the goal of incident response is to identify if a security breach or an incident has been reported. We want to discover what's happened, how it's happened, when it happened, why it happened, and if we can, who's done it. In some cases, that's not always possible, especially with a lot of foreign attacks coming in. Sometimes we don't have the resources. Attacks may come from across the other side of the world, and it's just not something that you can put the answer to all the time as a person perspective. But we try to identify technical artifacts as much as we can. So where we work as incident responders is we'll then work with a client, our clients, for example, and we'll work to see how we can amend the issue, how we can bring them back to a baseline security and help them recover from an incident. As I say, we also provide proactive services as well. So sometimes we work with clients to prepare them in advance for incidents. Maybe they feel that their security infrastructure isn't up to the best it could be, or they just want to run through some test scenarios. And we also provide guidance for challenging situations. I've caught a few of the other talks earlier on, and I know some of the guys from other companies were saying when an incident happens, it can be quite scary, and depending on the client, it can be quite a frightening situation. So we're there to give guidance to clients and customers, and just help them through, give them a guiding hand, as it's something that we experience more than them, for example. So incident response as a whole, we like to look at it as a life cycle. It's constantly evolving and developing. It's like offensive security. Tools are constantly being developed. New vulnerabilities, new threat actors are always sprouting up and causing incidents. So we look at it as an ongoing life cycle. But it can be split down into 4 main stages. The first stage is preparation. So as I say, I work at a consultancy, so generally speaking, our clients will already have approached us with some form of preparation in mind, but we can also work with them as well. But in a general perspective of incident response, this is developing an incident response plan. So this is a plan of action that's used. So if an incident were to happen, such as a ransomware attack, it details the steps followed by the company, their procedures and actions, who to involve within the incident, and basically gives them a clear plan of action that can be passed around the company or anyone working with them, so that everyone's on the same page, everyone knows what's available. It can also include access to resources as well, so central login systems, access to on-site equipment, for example. So it details all these in steps. So if an incident were to come into play, you can refer to the document, and there's a written plan there. Some of the other proactive services that you can do within incident response, testing the response to incidents. So we refer to these as tabletop exercises. So it's where one group may act as a threat actor and try to simulate a dummy incident, just to see the client's or the company's response to incidents. And then what we can do is we can identify any issues that went. We can review the process, the incident response plan, see if there was any issues. Maybe there's things we didn't have access to that the process could have been improved more, and just generally see how, give them a test run through. It's kind of similar to red teaming. So when we do adversary simulation for some of our other clients, we do the similar thing with them. And we also look to increase customer capabilities as well. And this is also true in-house with internal incident response teams as well. We can speak with our clients, for example, and we can help to, when we've addressed these weaknesses in their infrastructure, maybe, we can put forward some recommendations so they can make improvements. So that the next time an incident were to happen, they're more prepared, and we can maybe be more prepared within their infrastructure to provide a helping hand to them. So a good example of this is central logging systems, for example. A company might have maybe on-device login, but it might be hard to access this login information, and it might not be something that they've realized until we show them the scale of what happens in an incident. So a good example would be a great increasing of customer capabilities would be to implement centralized login across an infrastructure. That way, if there was an incident, The incident response team, whether that's ourselves or internal ones, they can access these logs, and we can identify threats a lot sooner. We've got more information at our hands. Moving on, we've got the detection and analysis stage of the cycle. So generally, as a consultant, this is where we'll be brought into an incident. Generally speaking, our clients will be running their own detection software, such as EDR solutions or antivirus detections, and they'll detect something that's not right. As I say, it can be something quite noticeable, like a ransomware attack. So they may log on to their systems as usual. Their service is not running, and there's several encrypted artifacts all over the file system with ransom notes, which can be quite obviously ransomware. We can also have different indicators as well, such as users noticing something funny. So it might be a phishing email, for example. We might have a user in a sales department might highlight that they've received a malicious email. They've not realized at first. So generally, there's a lot of things we can do to detect incidents. And what will happen is, as a consultancy, as I say, this is normally where we get brought in by a third party. So the client will have detected an incident, and then we'll liaise with them to try to get involved and see how we can move forward to amend it. So generally, this will include having conversations with them, trying to find, asking them what's happened in their words, when it's happened, for example. This gives us a great baseline to start from. And what we do then, we start to form a hypothesis. In some scenarios, what the customer tells us, it might not be the definitive answer. So an example might be that attackers may have laterally moved, for example, from one endpoint to another, and the customers detected the incident at a much later date. But it always gives us a great baseline to start from. So we'll form our hypothesis at this stage, and then we'll work to prove or disprove that. And the main way that we do this is via technical analysis, which I'll come on to a little bit later and discuss the major categories for that. So once we've identified a threat, we're going to work with the client to contain it. At this stage of the cycle, we call the containment, eradication, and recovery. And what we do here is we work with the client to contain the threat and bring them back to a security baseline. So once we've identified the nature of the attack and the scale of it, the scope of devices that it includes, we'll make a plan to remove the threat. So this is generally very different for different scenarios. There's never a one-shoe-fits-all scenario with incident response. But we'll have discussions with our clients, for example, and we'll work with them to find a closure point that suits them. It's good for their business. So as I say, we've got some smaller clients, and this might be a large incident for them that they've never encountered before. So we might have to do quite a lot of work with them to establish the next methods and steps to do. Maybe their incident response plan isn't the best if it was an emergency call out, for example, and we can work with them to facilitate the end of and recover from the incident. Whereas we may have some quite mature clients that have got a specific incident that they're just not quite familiar with, and they've just reached out for some additional help with the incident. And once the threat's been identified and the scope, we may just be able to leave them to the recovery stage themselves. It might be something that they're well versed in and they have the infrastructure there. And then, yeah, as I say, this will be the closure point we'll identify with a client. The last stage of the incident response lifecycle is the post-incident activity. So this is what we do after an incident is resolved. So once we've recovered from an incident, we'll always do some feedback. In our case, it's one of our clients. We'll recommend some ways to move forward from the incident. This might be updating or patching systems, for example, as every company is different and their infrastructure varies significantly. In industry, sometimes you may have some out-of-date software and stuff. So we'll advise clients to work with this. And generally, we'll put forward some detections as well, so the same threat doesn't happen again. We'll work with our clients in our example to find detections that are suitable for them and their infrastructure, as you can't always assume what certain clients are running. We'll also discuss and we'll do some evaluation meetings after and discuss the lessons learned. So this is, we might have an example, as I say, drawing back earlier, to no centralized login systems. And it might be something that would prove vital during the incident and we could have recovered from it a lot easier. So we'll bring this up and we'll make recommendations to move forward later on. So generally, the life cycle can be summarized down to 4 simple steps. As I touched on earlier, we'll in our case, we'll speak with the client and we'll understand the issue. But if this was working within an internal team, for example, you might have a SOC analyst, for example, a level 1 SOC analyst. So someone that's monitoring logs, keeping their eyes on detections coming in, that's noticed a positive detection. So they might escalate this to an incident response team. Or in our case ourselves, it's usually a client that will notify us, and they want a bit more information about what's going on. So we'll work with them to understand what's going on. We'll understand where it's happened, and we'll make some plans to contain the threat. Once we found the scope, we do this via technical analysis. Then we move on to remediation and then monitoring after. So as I say, making detections and ensuring that the estate's back to normal. And the business can continue in its usual manner. So I mentioned earlier about the technical analysis, and we mainly categorize this into 3 main areas. We have host analysis, log analysis, and malware analysis, and each play their own parts within incidents. So I'm just going to go over some details about each of the categories and just give a bit of an overview of them. As I say, I won't go too technical because there's quite a lot of information to go through. But I'll just be covering some of the tools that you can use, and I've provided some open source alternatives as well to quite popular tools. So if it's something you're looking to try out, maybe you've got a home lab at home and you're quite interested in the topic, you can take a look at the tools. I've got some resources at the end as well. You'll be able to follow through and you'll be able to improve your skill set. So the first is host analysis. We can reframe this as well as analyzing a device. So say we have identified a laptop, for example, that we've identified a laptop, say a sales consultant has come through and said that there's something wrong. They've opened a malicious email by accident and not realized until after. What we can do is we can do a full analysis of this laptop. So the way we work with this is we first aim to take a forensic copy of the hard disk of the device. What we do there is we can image the disk, and the process of this is to create a copy of the data so that we're not affecting the original. A good tool for this is FTK Imager, which is free. What you can do with this, you can make disk images that then you'll work on a disk image to gather your evidence, as I say, so the original is kept intact. What you'll do then, once you've acquired a disk image, what we can do is we can highlight evidence that we can find within the device. We call this stage the disk triaging stage, which just means to gather evidence. So there's several tools that you can use here, which are Autopsy is one that I personally use. It's an open source alternative. What I'll do is I'll just show you a few screenshots after this of Autopsy, give you a little look around it. And there's some proprietary options as well, like X-Ways we also use, and Encase, which is quite popular with the law enforcement agencies in the UK. It might be around others in the world, but I'm not too sure about that. We can also, if the scenario presents itself, we can also perform memory analysis as well. So this is looking at the RAM of a device and identifying threats within the processes. So there's a good framework for this. It's called the Volatility Framework, which is open source. It's written in Python. And what we'll be able to do is you'll be able to get a bit more information what's actually running in the memory of a device, if it's still on at the time. So the scenario I mentioned before could be a quite advantageous scenario. But generally speaking, when we get called out to incidents, for example, it might be quite challenging to do memory analysis. So it's not something we hold quite high regards. We use it in specific circumstances when it's needed and when it proves accessible and necessary. So here's just a screenshot of Autopsy, the layout of it. So this is a disk triaging software. What we'll do is we'll load a disk image into Autopsy, and we can use this tool to go through the file system, and we can bookmark and notify malicious files or any evidence of activity on the device that might be suspicious. And we can bring this together so that we can pass these notes around the between our team, highlight them to the client. Autopsy also has a good feature as well, and I believe it's the other two tools I mentioned have it as well. They have the process of an ingest module. So if you look towards the bottom left of the bottom of the left pane, you can see several categories highlighting several bits of information. So what this is produced by, it's by the ingest modules of Autopsy. These are automatic scripts that are run whilst the disk image is loaded to find common artifacts throughout the device. So an artifact is just a nice way of saying evidence. It could be a log file, the timestamps of a file, say a ransomware note. So we can use these to trace back and get timestamp and work from there. Our main aim with triaging is to find the initial point of an incident. So maybe we've found a device and we want to get back to when the incident initially happened, and we can work forward from there to see the extent and the scope of an attack or an incident. Autopsy's also got a good feature as well, which is timelining. As I say, what timeline is we can organize all the artifacts within a operating system. So the files, logs, and several other bits of evidence that Autopsy automatically pulls from a disk image, and we can organize it by the time and date. So here you can see the log files going through. This is an example lab that I've put links to at the end. It's from the Autopsy lab. And they basically give you a ransomware-ish scenario. So what you can do is you can go onto the lab and you'll be able to find bits of evidence. And what you can do is you can go into the timeline feature, which lets us segregate all this evidence by different timestamps. So it's really helpful in finding the initial points of access and building a timeline of an incident. So we can convey that to the client, or if it was an internal issue with another business, for example, they'll be able to pass that information on to the other teams. So that's an overview of device analysis. Another key skill in incident response is log analysis as well. So generally with devices and network devices, you have a lot of log data generated, which will be generated at different events. So for Windows, for example, we have the Windows event log, where events are saved to a certain location when activities take place on the device. And for Unix operating systems like Mac and Linux, we have the log files in var log. So these logs hold vital information to us. And as I say, with timelining, it helps us really paint a picture of an incident, and we can backtrack through time, and we can see the first occurrences of malicious activity, for example. Depending on the infrastructure as well, PCAP or network traffic files might be available to us. So this can be either from running on a device. A common example to do this is Wireshark, but generally in an infrastructure environment, you would find a network tap device. So some of our more mature clients will capture network traffic in some of the core bits of their network, and this proves vital to see network communications, and we can also see if there's any malicious activity transferring between devices, which can really help to scope out a multi-device incident. And quite a lot of vendors now as well use EDR solutions or SIEM solutions. An EDR is an endpoint detection and response solution. So this is kind of like a superpowered antivirus that runs on devices and can do detection-based, signature-based detection, on the device. And what you can do is you can pipe this into a SIEM solution, which is a security event management software. So we can take these detections and logs from several devices and put them all into a centralized location, as I was mentioning earlier. This can prove vital for responders like myself. If we're working with a client, we can look in a centralized location and get all the information that we need in one spot. So a quite popular tool used in the industry for this is Splunk, but a popular tool as well that I like using is Elastic Stack, which is open source, sometimes referred to as an ELK stack. It's open source and it's free, which is brilliant. And I'd highly recommend taking the time to have a look at it. And you can set up your own little lab at home. It doesn't take much resources, and start to get a better idea of how these solutions work, and just have a general play with them. All of the solutions come with some sample data too. You'll be able to get a bit more experience with the tools. I say this really with a lab environment as they're really useful activities to do if you're looking to move into the industry, and you'll give you a boost and a head start on top of your studies. And when you come into a role, they're really good tasks and activities to be able to do. They'll really help out with your role. So I'm sure you're probably all familiar with Wireshark. It's the I won't cover this too much, but we can monitor and analyze network traffic using Wireshark, and we can also capture it too. And as mentioned, SIEM solutions as well. We have Kibana, which is the front end for the Elastic Stack. Here you can see a detections alerts dashboard that's been set up. And you can use this to identify issues. So something that I've done personally myself is I've set up my own lab at home, and you can drop in test data to Kibana, and you can start to have a look around. When you move into industry, or you work with a client, for example, they might use a different solution because every client and configuration is different. However, if you get the basics understandings down with one solution, it's applicable to different solutions. So finally, we're coming on to malware analysis. So within incident response, sometimes we can't gather all the information we need from certain artifacts within the operating system. And we might identify a malicious exe, for example, but we can't gather as much information as we need from it from external resources. So what a tool we do have at our disposal is malware analysis. We use this tool reservedly with incident response, as generally, in my case, for example, we work with a client, we'll look for, we call them quick wins, which are fast, hard evidence facts that we can use to move forward to paint the picture. But in certain scenarios, we do need to find some more information about programs, for example, and the best way to move forward with this is by reverse engineering them. So I'm not the best malware analyst in the world. I'm trying to get there, but some of the tools that you can use are debugger. So a debugger is a tool that you can use to step through a program, instruction by instruction, and you can really map out what exactly it's doing each step of the process. And there's also decompiling solutions as well. So if we take an exe program, for example, when it's compiled, the code, typically C or any other language, will be compiled into assembly and machine code. So what we can do is we can pull this back, machine code, sorry, and we can decompile this back into assembly and even C code and get a better, more high-level understanding of what a program's doing. So some good tools for decompiling are IDA. It is a paid-for solution. But if you can find they do a freeware version of it as well, the previous versions, that's a great tool to use. And the NSA a few years ago released Dydra as well, which is a similar alternative to IDA, which is open source as well. So these tools are great at being able to analyze malware and really paint a better picture of what's going on with it. And we can use information found within executables, for example, such as strings. That might trace us back to, say, client's IP address, or a certain process that's been undertaken by the executable, such as an encryption method for ransomware. It depends on the scenario. As I say, it's something that we use more reservedly, but it is a tool that we have at our disposal as well. It's just generally because it does take a lot of time, and sometimes the return for the investment can be quite low. So as I say, this is some of the interface of Ghidra, for example, and you can see in the center how we can take the instructions that the computer reads, and we can turn them into to graphs of assembly. And what this does is it helps us to build a better picture of what's actually going on with the program. It builds a higher level that a human can read. It doesn't convert the program back to its original source code, but it gives us just enough information that we can use it to help us out in some situations. So I'm just going to cover some of the other skills as well that would be great to know, generally with IR, but also just moving forward in your career. And I'm sure you've probably touched on a lot of them during your studies at university. Knowing your internals for operating systems is great, especially Windows and Linux, as when you move into the industry, they make up the vast majority of devices used. So generally you'll find that companies will use Windows-based stuff, solutions for their desktops and the servers for domains. And you'll also find that several companies as well use Linux-based systems as well for their servers. Being able to get around the operating systems as well via the terminal or command prompt is a great skill to have as well. As you progress more and you start looking into more tools and new research, blog posts, for example, that other people are releasing, you do find a lot of tools that are run through command line, for example. There's also a lot of artifacts as well that we can gain. It's just a lot easier to use the command line. Some of the advanced things can seem quite daunting at first, but if you carry on and you use the terminals regularly, you pick up good habits with it fairly fast, and it's a great skill to have. Programming as well, as I'm sure you know, with your CTF challenges, programming is a great skill to have. Quite a popular tool that's used in the industry is Python. It's a scripting language that's very easy to pick up, and we can use it for quick development. Whether this is just scripts to run to help our workflow, maybe working with a new client system and we need to aggregate a lot of data quickly. Also just for building your own tools as well. So there's several libraries that are available that can be used to create new tools. And there's quite a lot of innovative things that can be accomplished with it. But having at least one programming language under your belt is a great skill to have when moving forward in your career. And lastly as well, networking fundamentals. So it's great to have the fundamentals of networks covered. Generally from my perspective, as I say, I work with several different clients, so their networks and configurations vary between every single site. We have some clients that maybe they run a lot of internal infrastructure for a lot of in-house employees. And we have others that are mainly remote based, and they might have data centers in certain locations. So the client's infrastructure changes differently. I imagine for an internal role, if you were working within a business, you'd have a lot more knowledge on this because it'd be your own internal systems, for example. You can get to know systems like the back of your hand. But great things to look for is the communication between client and server programs for several different protocols such as SSH, DNS, and just looking through your general protocols, your main ones that you're covering at the moment. They're brilliant to have under under your belt. And looking at domains as well. So one thing that I wasn't so versed in when I came into the industry was how Windows domains work, working within Active Directory. So that's a great skill to have. As I say, you'll come across it quite a lot in the industry, and you might jump into other clients' infrastructures, and you've got to hit the ground running and look at a new environment quite quickly to analyze what threats are in it. So I'm just going to talk about some of the additional resources that I've mentioned before. So there's quite a lot to talk about within the within this talk, and I wanted to keep it quite fairly high level, just not to bog everyone down with a lot of technical information, because it'd be quite quite time consuming. So I've given you some good additional resources to take a look at that will help you paint a better picture and improve incident response skills. So we have the NIST Security Incident Handling Guide. This will give you a talk through some of the steps I mentioned, for us to talk through some of the steps I mentioned at the beginning. And what we can do, you can do is cover the life cycle of an incident, best practices to take at each stage, and how you can get guidance on how to move forward with that. A good way to learn as well, and good thing to achieve is external certifications. So we are actually a CREST affiliated company. So I've been working towards my CPIA at the moment, and look to do my CRA in the future. So that's the CREST Practitioner Incident Analyst and the Registered Analyst as well. But SANS also do some excellent courses on digital forensics too. So they're great to check out. Another great resource that I found myself coming back to time and time again is 13 Cubed, which is a YouTube channel about digital forensics. There's quite a lot of information with regards to the forensic value of evidence within operating systems. So he does very thorough, detailed videos about why certain artifacts within an operating system can be used within an investigation, and the relevance. So how you can prove this, say either to a client or to an internal team, to show why a piece of evidence means what it means. And as I mentioned earlier as well, there is an autopsy training course and lab available. I believe they're available for free online. You should be able to find those. I know the training is on YouTube now as well. That gives you a great thorough walkthrough using Autopsy. So it'll show you how to take a disk image and find evidence within it and be able to mark that up. There's also a reporting tool as well, so you can quickly cipher that information out and present it in a meaningful fashion. And I'm sure some of the guys that are into the offensive security as well are quite aware of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So the MITRE ATT&CK framework is a collection of APT attacks. MITRE have taken a lot of the attack methods and put them all together collectively so that security professionals alike can reference them. And there's also methods to detect the attacks as well. So if you're looking into a certain protocol, for example, or you've got a certain attack method that you'd like to implement some detections for, might provide some additional resources for how to detect them, which is great to look into. And just two more resources I found that I find myself coming back to time and time again. Jamieton has got a cheat sheet online for digital forensics with a ton of artifacts and evidence that can be found within Windows, and I believe Linux operating systems as well, and commands on how to achieve this information as well. So even if you're interested in offensive security, for example, these cheat sheets prove invaluable. I find myself referencing them time and time again. And they're really great to look into. You might see something on there, and you can take the information and refer to some of the other resources as well. Say, for example, on Awesome DFIR, which is a large collection of resources put together for helping out incident response. I believe there's also some social media accounts on there as well, and some good blogs to follow. So yeah, there's, as I say, I've got my my social media as well tagged in the end. If there's anything you'd like to, if there's anything else you'd like to go over, if you find any resources of your own that you might think are valuable to me and myself, the community, it'd be great to hear from you and put that forward. So thanks for listening. As I say today, we've just done a high-level overview of incident response, just to kind of give you a picture of what the role, what the industry is, and just kind of give you a bit of experience of some of the things I've come across as an analyst working within the role. We've covered some of the common tasks that you'll probably be studying, you'll be taking part in once you work in the role, and some of the tools that you can look into if you'd like to. And as well, there's the additional resources. But as I say, I've got my social media tag there as well. So if you find anything else, or if you want to have a discussion about some things, it'd be brilliant to hear from you. And just kind of just move forward. As I say, when I first moved into the industry, it was quite daunting for myself coming from university into the industry. And I just hope that I've provided some value with a bit of a head start of things you can look into if it's something you're interested in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We do have time for, I think, one question. Is it all right if we can you take one question?
Yeah, sure.
So I have a few here. I'm going to try to pick one that I think will be good.
I'll try my best to answer them. That's the best my ability.
So I think this goes in line with what you're just saying about coming from university to going to industry. So how much of your day-to-day is using tools versus understanding like the technology and infrastructure, or just understanding how computers work or how networks work? Is it both that you need? Do you need them equally, or should we be focused on learning tools more than theory in order to be a good incident response member?
It's a mix of both, definitely. As I say, I work in a consultancy, so I work with clients and it varies a lot. So I might work with a client that they use a type of solution that I've heard of, but not that specific product. So I'm constantly researching new things. My advice would be to get your processes down. If you can take the open source tools that I've listed on the slides and pick one for each category and master them, they'll go hand in hand. Your theory will improve as the tools improve, and you'll start to tie bits together. But I generally say using the tooling and getting your roles down to up to scratch is the best method first.
Another question was, can you kind of explain more the day-to-day? Are you doing a new incident every day, or is it like an incident happens once every few months? Like, is there a lot of downtime, or is it a lot of pressure all the time? When an incident's happening, you have to be working like around the clock to solve it. Is there a lot of pressure that you're feeling regularly?
No. Well, we work slightly. I mean, it depends on the emergency of the incident. I mean, typically we'll work slightly longer, but we work within our general day-to-day job. So I'm normally on 9 to 5. Maybe we'll stay an extra hour or two later. Obviously, as I say, I work as a consultant for third parties. But yeah, there's downtime as well. It's not constantly incidents, but it varies with the threats out. So I remember earlier last year with the Hafnium exploits, we had a few clients that contacted us with concerns regards to that. So you have stages where things pick up, but in your downtime as well, you've got plenty of time to research. We also look at ways we can improve, as I say, with our proactive services for our clients. So there's always something to be doing.
But it's not like you're constantly fighting fires the whole time. There's there's an ebb and a flow to it. Okay.
That might change for some. I'd say that's my personal experience, but I think for some other people, if you worked in an internal role, for example, and you were just focusing on one infrastructure, maybe it'd be a different situation. But for every organization, it's a different landscape.
I'm just checking if we have, because I think we can still do one more question.
Yeah, sure.
So last question is, what kinds of incidents keep you up at night? What are the ones that scare you the most? What are the most challenging ones for you? And conversely, what are the easier ones?
Ransomware is probably the worst. Obviously, depending on the client, it's always quite a critical incident. It's very severe because generally speaking, with ransomware, your data's gone. You've got to refer back to an incident response plan. Hope that a client has got some sort of backup methodology. Hope to God it's like a retained client. We've advised them of this beforehand, but an emergency ransomware response would probably be the most stressful. I'd say the least stressful would probably be an insider threat. So maybe a company has just noticed some intellectual property and you just want to investigate an internal employee, for example. So we classify these as incidents as well, but they'd probably be the more lower risk ones. I mean, every incident's different. An internal employee could set off ransomware, for example, but generally speaking, yeah.
That's what we've been hearing from other conference panelists as well. We had a CEO speak this morning, and he said that not his company, but 3 of his friends basically have had to pay up millions of dollars. They couldn't get around it. They couldn't do it fast enough. They couldn't get back to business fast enough. They ended up just paying. which is really scary. I mean, it's pretty horrible.
It's a really big threat at the moment. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how the security landscape moves in the next few years. Obviously, we've seen a lot of stuff in countries like America, for example, banning the payments. I'm not sure if it's banned or highly making sure the payments aren't made to attackers, for example, just to decrease the profitability. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the threat landscape changes in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, so I think with that, we're going to conclude. So thank you very much, Sam, for your time. The tools are amazing. We have a big list of them. I'm sure our students are taking note and will be learning as we go. The entire overview was quite helpful to understand the process that you go through in incident response. Is also very comprehensive, which I do agree. Watching you go through it all, it's like, oh, this is daunting. There's just so much to learn.
Exactly.
It's like
trying to include technical information with that too would be too much.
One day at a time, though, right? So I really do like your approach. That one day at a time, keep on with it, and you will carry on, and you will eventually get it. You'll get it down, and you'll be able to contribute and get your bearing on it. And I think that's the way it is with all technical fields. You know, at the beginning, you look at it, and you're like, I'm never going to get all that. But then you keep working on it, and before you know it, you know so much, and you don't even remember when you learned it all.
Exactly.
And now you're just doing it. So I really do appreciate the talk. I know all our students and listeners do as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.